It is the 8th century BC, and the Italian peninsula is a hodgepodge of different cultures, all feuding and blending together. The Celts up to the north, the Greeks along the southern coasts, and a variety of different Italian tribes, such as the Etruscans, the Samnites, and especially for our purposes, the Latins. For it was in Latium, along the river Tiber, that a collection of settlements, of farmers and of shepherds coalesced into a single city-state, Rome. Although they began with a monarchical system, the Romans would usurp this government in 509 BC, and in its place establish a republic. In time, centuries' time, this small, insignificant republic would become the empire we all know and associate with Rome to this day. But how did it get to this size? With such an enormous spread of territory, encompassing a plethora of different biomes and terrains and societies, it is almost a given that the army of the Roman Republic had to be adaptable and versatile in order to achieve what it gradually conquered over the centuries. In this video, we shall be looking at the evolution of the Roman military, constantly breaking the constraints and barriers of its situations through efficiency, ingenuity, and sheer grit. From its infancy, war was a defining feature of Roman culture and lifestyle. The Roman army began as a collection of citizen soldiers. These would be men recruited from every class of the citizenry, who would be levied together in times of war into larger units known as legions. Besides the poorest echelons of society, each man would be expected to purchase and maintain their own armor and weaponry. The army was led by the patrician aristocracy. Alongside the heavy infantry soldiers, there would also be a cavalry component of equestrians, and a force of light skirmishers made up of the poorer classes, the velites. With all of Rome's men involved in the matter of war, it's rather fitting then that Mars, the Roman god of war, was the patron deity of the early Roman state. The early Roman army was an amalgamation of the cultural ideas and influences in which it found itself surrounded. Under the direction of King Servilius in the 6th century BC, the Roman army first styled itself in the fashion of a Greek hoplite army. Each of these proto-legionaries equipped themselves in the hoplite manner, with a round shield called a clypeus, a sword, and a long spear. The legions arranged themselves in the formation of a phalanx, a tight body of speared men which could slowly advance and stiffly resist frontal enemy assaults. Over the centuries, the Romans eventually solidified their control over the whole of Latium, and from there began to expand outwards into other regions, such as Etruria, Campania, and Umbria. There was one particular region of Italy, however, that posed a unique and difficult challenge to the Romans: Samnium. Starting in 341 BC, the Samnite Wars between the Samnites and Rome began a decades-long struggle for the Romans to succeed on what was previously foreign turf. The phalanx is a very tight and effective formation, which, as evident by its widespread usage from the Greeks to the Etruscans to the Romans and beyond, is very effective. In other circumstances, such as in the rugged Apennine mountains of Samnium, that very same rigidity became its weakness, as there the formation is unable to maneuver itself without falling into complete disarray. In order to combat the limitations in which the Romans found themselves with the Samnites, they undertook their first major restructuring in the military. The Roman legions did away with the phalanx formation in favor of the maniple system. A maniple was comprised of about 120 men, divided into 3 lines. The front hastati comprised the newer soldiers, the middle principes got those with middling experience, and the veteran triarii located in the rear. In Book 8 of Livy's History of Rome, he describes how the maniple would function in combat. When the battle formation of the army was completed, the hastati were the first to engage. If they failed to repulse the enemy, they slowly retired through the intervals between the companies of the principes, who then took up the fight, the hastati following in the rear. If the principes were also unsuccessful, they slowly retired to the triarii, which has given rise to the proverbial saying, when people are in great difficulty, matters have come down to the triarii. In addition to other changes during this time, such as the replacement of the clypeus with the more recognizable scutum as the main choice of shield, The Roman infantry was now made much more versatile to fight in new terrains thanks to its flexibility caused by the maniple. The Romans would eventually go on to defeat the Samnites, and further military conflicts would see the Romans subdue just about the entirety of the Italian peninsula. It was then in Sicily that the Romans first got into conflict with Carthage, a maritime empire which is established by the Phoenicians of Tyre. Writing several centuries later, Cassius Dio writes on the situation. As a matter of fact, the Carthaginians, who had long been a great power, and the Romans, who were now growing rapidly stronger, looked on each other with jealousy. They were drawn into war, partly by the desire of continually acquiring more possessions, and partly by fear. In contrast to Rome, the Carthaginian Republic based its success off of its navy. Of course, in order to combat a naval power supremacy, one must do so at sea, with the navy. There's just one little problem. The Romans didn't really have a navy. The solution was simply to build a new navy from scratch. The Romans set to work, and despite having few ships and little prior knowledge of sailing, the Romans nevertheless built a fleet from scratch and quickly adapted to the new circumstances of the sea. The Romans, knowing their fleet was inevitably going to be poorer in quality to that of Carthage, devised a new technology to augment their ships, the corvus, which in English translates something like crow or raven. It was simply a bridge of wood that could swivel around the vertical axis and could allow the Romans to board the Carthaginian ships, essentially turning the sea battle into one upon land. The effect on the Carthaginians was striking. The ancient writer Polybius writes, "As soon as they came to close quarters, their ships were invariably tightly grappled by these machines. The enemy boarded by means of the crows and engaged them on their decks. And in the end, some of the Carthaginians were cut down, while others surrendered in bewildered terror at the battle which they found themselves engaged, which eventually became exactly like a land fight." Despite several, frankly colossal, setbacks at sea, the Romans finally managed to turn the tides of the naval war in their favor. After having already prevailed in the land struggle in Sicily, the Romans then won the First Punic War, thus proving they could achieve victory through a cunning mixture of tactical strategy and raw perseverance of their wills to fight. With the coming of the 2nd century BC, Roman expansion really took off. Time and time again, the Roman military would demonstrate its efficient and versatile prowess in the field against its enemies, ranging from Spain to Macedonia to Africa. As the Roman Republic stretched across the Mediterranean, a problem arose when the men of the armies themselves became overstretched. The nature of Rome's foreign wars meant that men had to be recruited to serve for often years at a time. Particularly to independent farmers who had to leave their land for many years, the property would soon fall into disrepair and be sold off, making them landless and exacerbating the late Republic's socio-economic issues. Therefore, with each new campaign to be waged or province to be garrisoned, the military's reliance upon the citizen soldier was becoming more and more unsustainable. Starting around his first consulship in 108 BC, a Roman general and statesman by the name of Gaius Marius would begin to implement significant reforms to the Roman military. Here the Greco-Roman historian Plutarch remarks on how Marius emphasized his troops' self-sufficiency. Setting out on the expedition, he labored to perfect his army as it went along, practicing the men in all kinds of running and in long marches, and compelling them to carry their own baggage and to prepare their own food. Additionally, in order to relieve the dearth of manpower, Marius opened up the rank and file of the Roman legions to the landless poor. This is a huge change, as it created career soldiers, ones who would be salaried, and ones who would eventually receive land upon their retirements. While this relieved the short-term shortage of soldiers for the armies, it also played a critical role in shifting the loyalties of these soldiers from the Republic itself to their employers, the generals, which would have a critical impact upon the fall of the Roman Republic in the coming decades. As you can see, the Roman Republic was one of constant evolution. In dealing with the practical dilemmas they faced, even the traditionalist Romans were not unwilling to change the way their armies functioned. The Roman military of the Republican era ultimately succeeded due to the famed tenacity and eagerness to evolve in the pursuit of gain and glory for the Republic.